to introduce our speaker, Pam Breaux. Dr. Breaux is a longtime resident of Virginia Beach and has been serving this community for countless years. She has blessed our church many times with her music and her words of wisdom. Dr. Breaux has a PhD and is an ordained minister of 34 years in the Disciples of Christ and the United Church of Christ. She has earned her master's in theater from Schiller College in West Berlin, Germany, and went on to teach communications, English, and drama for several universities and colleges in Virginia. Dr. Breaux earned her Master of Divinity from Union Theological Seminary in New York City. She has earned her doctorate in theology and anthropology at Chicago Theological Seminary and University of Chicago, and did her field work in missions as reconciliation with Lakota Sioux Indians on the Pine Ridge and the Rosebud Reservations through Catholic Theological Union. Pam has served as the associate pastor at the Church of Christ at Yale University and retired in 2016 as pastor of Living Waters Sanctuary in Virginia Beach, which she founded in 2006. She has been a national trainer in cross-cultural sensitivity for both denominations for over 13 years. In 2015, she was awarded the Human Rights Award for the Human Rights Council of Virginia Beach for her work in social justice and her interfaith dialogue. Though retired, Dr. Breaux still loves performing weddings, guest preaching, and spiritual counseling, drawing upon the various spiritual paths she has had the honor of walking. Let us open our hearts today for the message and welcome Reverend Dr. Breaux.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Susan, for that beautiful rendering. Thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. It's one of my favorite places to preach and to be fed and to be loved with the Spirit. I'm so happy that today is the third day of Advent with the word joy. I want you to look and see the traditional Advent wreath has 3 purple candles. Purple is the color of Advent chosen by the church at large. And then it has 1 pink candle. And scholars have never been able to find out why 1 pink candle. But there's those of us who suspect secretly Mary wished for a girl. That's a joke. That's a joke. So this morning, I feel like it's Christmas morning. I have so many gifts that I want to open for you and invite you to think about reimagining the Christ child story. And it starts with way back when I was a little girl, and we'd set up our creche team. I was the oldest of 4 little girls, and I would look and I would see, there's a father and a male baby, and then there's wise men, and then there's boys who are shepherds, and 1 woman, Mary, the mother. All rest are men. And I said, is that really what happened? Is that really the truth? Where are the women? Where are the girls? We're part of the story too, somehow, of this human race and its development. So I've had this question for many decades, and I want to share with you today, and just invite you, as I said, to reimagine with me or share with you some stories that have stuck with me and changed my worldview and my heart. Now, we've heard the beautiful reading about after the birth and the angels singing. And we all know that before that came, 9 months before, was the Annunciation, when Angel Gabriel comes to Mary and asks her of her own free will she do God's bidding? And I have come to believe that although she's often depicted in art with her head down, very meek, very mild in music, that she is the bravest human being outside of Jesus that ever lived, for her to open herself to that calling to be the mother of the long-awaited Messiah. Now, the American Orthodox tradition teaches that Mary was chosen at 3 years old, which is about the age of my granddaughter, Caledonia. And they say that she walked up the temple steps all by herself, so brave and pleased and proud to be chosen by the angel, and she danced. She danced. And then, I love this part, the whole Hebrew community danced with her in their joy. Edgar Casey tells a different story, and it's an interesting one as well, I believe. He talks about these scenes, and many of you know this, so I'm going to just refer to it. This special community that was at least in existence for 500 years before Mary was chosen. And the word seen means expectancy. They're expecting the Messiah to come, so they have to prepare their young girls into young women that would be fit, one of them, to be the mother of the Christ child. And so when Mary was 14, the story goes according to Mr. Casey. It's so beautifully written, one of my favorites. It's out of print now, we can't find it. But it's beautiful as she goes up the steps in the morning worship, and the sun is rising, and the angel comes and calls her to be the one. So beautiful. Now, we know that because of this brave heart, we can say Christmas is a season of the heart, which is the theme for today. Christmas is a season of the heart. Now, Mary conceives, as was told by the angel, and she's pregnant, and she's on her way with Joseph to be taxed in Bethlehem. And she rides a donkey, so tradition says. And I wanted to share with you one of my favorite Christmas stories, a synopsis of it, called The Donkey's Dream by Barbara Helenberger. And in this story, there are so many beautiful images that are all historically researched by Barbara to talk about Mary. And here's one example of Mary as the rose that I want, which is the queen of all flowers. So I want to read this to you. It's so beautiful. The Virgin Mary shares certain symbols with the universal Great Mother, the Divine Feminine. They have been given to her with special care by tradition. In this book, the donkey dreams of some of them. The city he is carrying on his back is a heavenly city, like the one in Revelation, full of promise and hope. On one of the Virgin's feast days, these words from a psalm are used. Glorious things are said of you, O city of God. From ancient times, the ship has symbolized a womb and a cradle. The ship on the donkey's back carries the Christ child to us across the sea. A medieval litany calls Mary, quote, ark and ship and breeze and haven, moon and lamp and coming home. Another litany calls her a spiritual vessel, the fountain of the garden, an image that comes to Mary from the Song of Solomon, is such a vessel. This well of living water is also shaped like a chalice. And in this legend, everywhere that Mary walks, the desert turns to blossom. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, another mystic, called the Virgin Mary a flower, and the rose, queen of flowers, is her symbol. She is the rose of the world, the rose without thorns, and the Rosa Mystica. In the heart of the mystic rose, the Holy Child is born. Mary is finally also Queen of Heaven. In painting, she is almost always robed in blue, the color of the heavens. So I encourage you to take a look at this book and give it to one of your precious children that you love if you'd like. So this expedition of this donkey, so we honor the creatures today and hopefully all days because they are sentient beings and a part of creation, such an important part, that they get to the innkeeper's house. They're looking for a place to stay for shelter. And the innkeeper, as you know, what he says. Well, I have a special story to tell you about this. While I was going to Union Seminary, I went to Riverside Church where William Sloane Coffin, one of the most famous preachers of the 20th century, was the preacher then for 3 years, and one of my good friends and my mentor. And he tells this true story when in the days, maybe they still do it in places, the children all do act out the story, the Christmas story. And they decided that they would invite a little boy who had Down syndrome to be the innkeeper. Now this was a risk, but the teachers worked with him really hard, and the pastor worked with him and his parents to get the one line right. The line that he would say is, "There is no room for you in the inn." So the big day came and everyone's all up in front, all the children, and he's dressed in a bathrobe with a big pillow tied underneath it, and he's waiting there. And the holy couple comes down the middle aisle and comes to him and asks for housing. And everyone holds their breath, and not a pin could be heard dropping. And he says, "There is no room for you in the inn." And there's a big sigh of relief. He said it beautifully. He said it perfectly. And so the couple, dejected, turns around and starts leaving. And the little boy, the little innkeeper, yells out, "Wait, you can stay at my house." A season of the heart. Christmas is a season of the heart. So, as Edgar Casey would have it, this is an interesting story. The innkeeper's wife was a member of the Essenes. She didn't live there in the community, but she was a member. And so they knew Mary and Joseph were coming, and they knew they had to throw the authorities off track. So the innkeeper was instructed that when they came to ask for shelter, he must say no, and very vehemently, so that he would look far distanced from the Essene community. And the other thing that Casey says, which I so love, is that they had a daughter themselves, and her name was Serapha. And Serapha was about 12 years old, and amazingly, she came this lifetime to see Mr. Casey for a reading. That's how we got this information. And she was so excited that this baby was going to be born that night, so they had been told. She said, "Mama, can I go see the baby?" And the mother said, "Yes, you can, but only after you do the chores." Well, that would have been so hard if it were me. But she made it through her chores. She just made it just before midnight. And she went up the hillside and she went to the stable and she hears the angels singing, Casey said, and her heart is filled with wonder and awe. And she doesn't really understand, but she knows a baby's being born. And that's what matters. And she goes to the stable and sees the little baby Jesus. And then my favorite part, comes the amazing moment when Mary says to her, "Would you like to hold him?" And she can't believe it. And yes, of course she'd love to hold him. And Mr. Casey says that her whole life through Christmas Eve has been her most favorite time in the year because of that memory on the hill there, holding the baby Jesus with the angels, singing peace to all. Christmas is a season of the heart. And now this brings me to my final question, which is this Jesus being born, the only begotten Son of God, the only child of God? Do we still believe that? Perhaps we do, but I know I don't. I don't, even as a pastor of 35 years. But I was troubled in seminary. How can Jesus be Emmanuel, God with us, and be someone that is a Messiah, totally above and beyond us? And David Spangler, who's also a mystic and one of the founders of Findhorn Garden, years ago when I wrote him to ask him about this question, he gave me the idea of the tip of a leaf, that humanity is like the little cells of the leaf. We are all leafness, and Jesus is too, but he's the tip of the leaf. And the tip of the leaf has a special calling, which is to go forth first, which is to be the evolutionary leader. And so he is both Savior and brother, friend, lover. I just love that analogy, and maybe that might be helpful to some of you. But for sure, he is the greatest lover of humankind, along with Mary. And Christmas is the season of the heart, which calls us to open our hearts and say, what are we going to bring? What are we going to bring to offer this Jesus? And the answer comes back, as it does throughout 2,000 years of music and poetry and writing, that we need to offer our hearts to Jesus, to be used as servants, as handmaids, as those who will work with Jesus toward bringing a new heaven and a new earth to our human plane. So kindness is the answer to that. And I love that the Dalai Lama has really forsaken his religion's title. He says all that matters to him now is kindness. He follows the religion of kindness. And so, we all know, in closing, that we are in a very, very difficult time in our history. We know about climate change. We know about the dangers to our Earth Mother and to all the creatures. We have actually, I just found out, as a human species, we have wiped out totally to extinction 1 million of God's creation. 1 million. And we're continuing to do it. And we know that we might be moving, we are moving, according to Matthew Fox, theologian, to our own extinction if we don't change our ways, if we don't change our consciousness to what we've sung about today and listened to. We have to change and remember what we are really here for and whose we are and who we are. Each one of us a precious child of God who has some work to do. I love this definition I just heard of hope. Hope is not patiently waiting for the Messiah to come. Hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. Hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. We've got a lot of work to do, my friends, a lot of work, but we can do it in love and in Christian community to build this new heaven and this new earth. It's all in the divine plan. And now as we take our morning offering, we're switching things around a little bit. I want to close my sermon as we take the offering with the song Christmas is a Season of the Heart. It was written by my dear, dear friend, many of our friends, Jim Dial, many years ago, who was, I believe, unjustly sentenced to prison for something he didn't do for 9 years in Virginia. And he still was able to write this lyrics of this song. It's amazing to me. Then finally, years later, I said, this is so beautiful. I could write some music. And so, might not be Chris Van Cleef, but I could do it for this music. And so I would like to share with you in honor and memory of our dear friend Jim. Christmas is a season of the heart.